Go back to this question of her overcompensating for the fact that she was a woman and therefore ran the risk of being judged as weak, and so made herself into this tough, steely person who then some people perceived as not female enough in her affect. When she was in Iowa, in some ways, maybe what the young women were reacting to was that they did not see enough of themselves in her, in the way that she carried herself.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's, yes. And, should she have been softer was kind of the question. More human was the question that was sort of being dealt with within the campaign. I don't know that she's capable of it in public. She's obviously capable of it in private. We've all seen her.
Right.
Those of us who've interviewed her, been around her off the record. But, after what she went through in the 90s as First Lady, this kind of wall came down where she didn't want to be too revealing. She didn't want to talk about her feelings in particular. She, really didn't want to talk about her mother or some of the things that actually if she talked about, I think would have worked really well for her. But it's just not who she is. And so I think the debate over should she have been more human is a little bit off the mark because I'm not sure she could do it.
Of course, the one time she did it in New Hampshire, right before she was getting ready to lose to Obama, where she teared up, it was actually, in some ways, the most important moment of her entire primary campaign.
Yes. But, well, first of all, she was furious at herself for letting it happen. In the immediate aftermath, before anybody knew that actually it was going to work, she said to one of her aides, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I showed weakness. And she was really distraught on the bus that afternoon. But I also am skeptical that people voted for her because she cried or choked up or was human. I don't think that was the dynamic as much as women in New Hampshire in particular started seeing her as under siege. And I'll describe it this way. 2 nights earlier, if you remember, she just lost Iowa. We all flew on this miserable overnight flight from Des Moines to Manchester. And that Saturday night, there was a debate. And in the debate, Obama, at one point, leaned into a mic and said, "You're likable enough, Hillary."
Right.
That, I think, was the beginning of the turning point, where women in New Hampshire kind of looked at themselves and said, what is he saying? And then on Monday, she chokes up, and she didn't actually cry, by the way. But
she just welled up, right?
She welled up for approximately 2.3 seconds. And you would have thought that she had a hysterical meltdown, the way it was discussed.
This was not Ed Muskie.
It wasn't even Ed Muskie.
Yeah.
She choked up for a second, and then she went back to her talking points. And actually, what she said was pretty boring if you go back and watch it again. But it was reported as her hysterical meltdown, and no one more authoritative than John Edwards said that wasn't presidential behavior.
Well, he should know.
Right.
Right, yeah.
And the cable chatter became, she's weak, she has to get out, she can't do this, etc. And that's where I think the votes came
Things
from.
really turned.
Was the piling on, not the fact that she acted. And then we never saw her choke up or do anything human like that again. That was the last time.
The double standard is so interesting when you consider that had a man cried, it would have been viewed so differently, and there would have been almost no way for it to turn around. Obama, I believe, only began to cry I think the only time we're aware that Obama teared up in public during the whole campaign was the day before the election when his grandmother died.
But then he really cried. If you've seen the documentary, he really cried. I mean, there were tears streaming down his face. Now, obviously a very good reason. But you look at the history of crime, and I only know this because Pat Schroeder, who cried when she...
In 88, right?
When she decided not to run, started keeping a file folder of men who cry in politics.
Right.
And
this is not a productive use of her time.
I don't know. Well, she did eventually throw it out, she said, because it got too big. But you think about George W. Bush. He was a weeper. I mean, he and his father would both. During one of his inaugurals, he couldn't even look at his father because he was afraid they would both cry. I mean, he cried all the time. And Clinton, too, would cry all the time. I mean, it was sometimes a combination of lip biting and feeling pain and crying, but they all cry.
Right.
And it's seen as sweet and endearing, and they're in touch with their feminine side. But just imagine if Sarah Palin cried, how everyone would respond.
Well, a woman crying is just viewed differently.
Right. There is not a woman in public life who doesn't have this issue. You know, maybe the only solution is to be Nancy Pelosi and have a husband who's extremely wealthy and also likes to go shopping for you. But, which he does. He buys all of her suits. But I felt
a lot of us. I'm sorry.
Great.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely. Not to go shopping.